Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. I interview leaders, experts and business professionals from around the world who are bringing leadership principles and know-how into the digitally driven 21st century workplace, with focus firmly on the how-to rather than the what. Each episode is in aid of a charity chosen by my guests, and since 2020, we've made donations to over 80 global and local causes. Welcome to this episode of the Rethink Leadership podcast with my guest Grant Harris, the founder and president of GTH Consulting, a minority and disability-owned management consulting firm. Grant's work helps leaders and organisations maximise outcomes for people and profit through the power of neurodiversity, as he puts it, from the boardroom to the mailroom. Grant's passion for neuroinclusion is more than professional, it's personal. As an autistic person who once memorised the flag of every country in the world by sight, and who's navigated both the corporate ranks and entrepreneurship as a non-linear thinker, he recognises the power of neuroinclusion in the workplace and the importance of equipping organisations everywhere with the tools to overcome obstacles and the barriers to achieving inclusive excellence. We get into that during this episode and uncover his journey, which is a testament to the unifying force of neurodiversity, positively impacting both human and financial capital and ultimately creating a stronger bottom line for the business. This episode is in aid of Doctors Without Borders, to which we've made a donation as a thank you to Grant for joining us. Grant, thanks very much for joining me. Please introduce yourself. Particularly also explain what makes your business special and your passion for a truly diverse workforce.
Jeremy, awesome. Thank you for allowing me to be here. It's a pleasure to be in your presence with all the work that you've been able to do. And I appreciate the opportunity to connect with your audience. Again, my name is Grant Harris. I'm founder and president of GTH Consulting, which is a minority and disability owned consulting firm. And my mission is to maximize outcomes for leaders from the boardroom to the mailroom. And I help leaders do that through the power of neurodiversity in the workplace. So that's really what my mission is all about. I am a 3-time published author. I'm a Hall of Fame athlete. I once memorized every flag of every country in the world on sight. Because I like flags and because that's how my brain works. I am also a late diagnosed autistic person, and I am also a proud introvert, which is funny because I've done dozens on dozens of podcasts and I hang out with people like you. But my natural state is to be an introvert. So I bring all of these qualities. I like to call myself an onion without the smell, because I bring all these qualities to conversations like these, to organizations in the nonprofit space, for-profit space, government sector, and higher education, which is where my previous experience lies and where I like to help leaders, again, maximize those outcomes for both people and profit at the end of the day. So that's a little bit about me, Jeremy, and I'm very excited to have this conversation with you.
It's fantastic. There's plenty to unpack already on that one. Let me tell you, Grant. I like the way you frame it as well. It's maximizing those outcomes from the boardroom to the mailroom. And I get that leaders have to have their feet firmly on the ground these days. One thing that had passed me by and you just skimmed over, you're a Hall of Famer athlete. Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. So I played every sport that I could touch a ball growing up. In my youth and childhood, but football and basketball were the ones that were prominent. I went to college on a football scholarship, which I was blessed to do. Less than, I don't know what the ratio is now, but like less than 20% of high school athletes get to go on to college and play at the scholarship level. So I played Division I football at Virginia Military Institute when I used to be fast and agile. If I try to get out there again now, I'd probably pull a hamstring. But that was at the college level. But before that, I was inducted into the inaugural class, a Hall of Fame class for my high school. Fortunately, I went to multiple high schools. I moved around a bit. And in the short time that I attended the high school that I graduated from, I was able to amass multiple records and these kind of things, and some still exist over 20. Very humbled to be in that inaugural class with some of the administrators there. And I did not go on to the professional ranks, but I don't know anybody else that is a Hall of Fame athlete on any level. So I hold that near and dear to my heart because that was a lot of time, energy, and effort spent to focus on and hone in on, which I believe some of my autistic traits help with that, but I didn't know that at the time. But I can understand that now. So that's a little bit about my athletic career. But once an athlete, always an athlete.
Yeah, I understand that too. Let's just say that I had ambitions to achieve what you did, but never quite managed it with any ball. So a great story, and congratulations for that. I would like to go and talk a little bit about your late diagnosis from an autistic spectrum point of view. These days, I'm talking about neurodiverse superpowers, and I want to know from you as a business leader how you found out about that, but how it has helped you lead your business, yourself and others over the years.
Yeah, well, that really starts with my origin story. And I wrote about this in my first book, a little bit about the first and only concept. So I'm the first and only in my family. I have two older siblings, five people in my family, to do many things. That doesn't make me better than my siblings. They've done many things that I haven't done. It's just that I was the first person in my family to be diagnosed with a disability, and much less to be neurodivergent, much less to be diagnosed as autistic, amongst other things. And you can read about those other things in my book. But I was the first in my family to be diagnosed with a disability. So at that time, when I was diagnosed, going on 4 or 5 years ago, I had taught autistic kids at the middle school level as a special educator in K-12. And those were Black and brown, underprivileged, high free and reduced lunch, low income, English as a second language kind of environment. And I help English language learners learn English. And they happen to be autistic, and I'm sure that they had other neurodivergences at the time, but I wasn't focused on that. And that was before I knew. My wife is ADHD, and she has known for a long time, and she was the catalyst to my diagnosis. I don't know if you're married, Jeremy, or in a significant relationship at all. And your listeners, if you've ever been in a significant relationship or married, do you understand that communication is a roller coaster? Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's in the dumps, sometimes it's so-so. It's all over the map, depending on where you are in your relationship. And unfortunately, at that time, we were kind of on the low slope, on the bottom of the U kind of deal. And we were like, what's happening here? So communication was off, and she was the catalyst to help me get a diagnosis. And I was very blessed to be able to have access, to have a referral from a family friend of a psychologist, which I am acutely aware that not all people like me that look like me, brown and Black people, have access. So that was the catalyst to my diagnosis. And at that point, I had already been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I hadn't been focused on the accessibility portion, and that heightened my focus on accessibility. And really, as over the last 3-4 years, as I've been coming into my own with neurodiversity, learning about how I show up, I was already working with leaders in different capacities, and now I look at it from a capacity of neurodiversity, which means that all of us have the same brain, meaning that your brain makeup is the same as mine. Frontal cortex, brain stem, 2 hemispheres, all of that is the same. But no 2 brains, Jeremy, are alike. They all operate differently, and they all show up differently. So when I started talking to leaders about these concepts, it went more, and most leaders that I speak to are working in a traditional format. This is the way we've been doing it. This is how it's always been done. And it's mostly linear, straight 180, no variance at all. But that's not really how the human brain operates. That's not how really people operate. That's just how, at least in America, that's how we've been trained to operate. So I look at conversations with leaders from a framework perspective, and we could talk about my race framework and how that breaks down. But it's really about understanding all the different ways that the brain and the people show up, because most people do not think on a linear path. And especially people like me, we think from a nonlinear perspective. And when you think from a nonlinear perspective and you open yourself to all of the advantages, both human capital and financial capital, which we'll get into, then you get nonlinear results, which are off the charts in terms of performance and innovation and loyalty and these types of things that organizations, both small and large, these things play up a makeup in their DNA in terms of success. So that's really, where my story started, from the first and only origin through to my diagnosis before, working with autistic children and having that level of connection with nonlinear thinking, and then bringing that conversation to the boardroom or to the intern room or to the mailroom to say, oh, we all have the same brain, but it all works differently. And if we are not just aware, but we accept that it all works differently, then we can get different results as well.
Well said. And there are a few things I'll come back to there, particularly about why other leaders should open their eyes to this sort of non-linear diversity of thinking. But let me ask you something first of all. One of the first things that you said when you referred to your diagnosis was you used the word disability. Would you use that word now?
Yes, 100%. And we can get into the layers of identity first and person first language and these types of things. But I identify as a person with a disability, and I am proud about that, obviously, because I'm here with you. And I have been out and loud proud about that, because we all, whether you identify as having a disability or not, whether you are formally diagnosed or not, we all have needs. And we all have needs that need to be supported at multiple levels throughout our lives, throughout our work career, throughout our relationships. We all have those support needs, whether you identify as disabled or not. The difference between identifying as disabled or not is what society sees you as, and the access to those supports, the access from a legal perspective to those supports and those accommodations, the access from a social perspective to communities that identify as the same way, whether they are formally diagnosed or not. So the difference being is, if you are not identifying as such, then you don't have access to those support systems that do exist. Are those support systems perfect? No, but they do exist. And people like me exist to help leaders utilize those support systems so that they can achieve not just outputs that people are creating, but governance level outcomes that organizations create for legacy impact. So that's how I identify as disabled, but I don't look down upon others, people who don't, and who identify as other, because to each their own. But it's my job to help organizations and leaders understand that language and understand that difference, and understand that whether you have 2 employees, 2,000 employees, or 20,000 employees, that you should all be giving those people that opportunity to identify as such, and then support them at the level that they are at that particular time in their career.
Yeah, it sounds like that society, government needs to catch up a little bit with the language, but also what we're discovering around this too. It feels like the more that we understand this, the more that we see the power also that comes with some levels of neurodiversity, as well as the flip side of that coin, which is the support network that needs to be there, how people are set up in business, how they work with others, all of these kind of things. And we're at the very tip of that. So it needs people like you to go into the leadership suite and talk about this. So when you do that, Grant, why should those leaders who are listening to you listen and open their eyes up to this kind of diversity of thinking, of doing, that comes with a much more diverse workforce, one that has neurodiverse rather than just neurotypical, and what it can deliver?
several reasons, both personal and professional. So I like to say that the future of work, neurodiversity isn't the future of work. It's really now. And if you aren't recognizing that your current workforce is already neurodivergent, 30 to 40% of that current workforce, if you aren't recognizing that, if you aren't aware of that, if you aren't taking advantage of that, and I say advantage in all the good positive ways, if you aren't utilizing that, then you are already obsolete and you're falling behind. So that's first and foremost, is that a lot of this conversation is always focused on the future of work. And I talk about the future of work, which I'll get to in a second, but I also want to start with like here and now. You have people right now, your workforce right now are already operating this way, whether it's undercover or not. So you already have a workforce that you need to recognize is neurodivergent. That's number one for the now, not just for, oh, my future workforce. I also talk about neurodiversity in the workplace from two perspectives, the human capital impact and the financial capital impact. A lot of times leaders are focused on the bottom line, and they should be. I get it. Leaders are in it to either make money or you're in it to make an impact, but you only make money if your people are productive. You only make money if your people are innovative, if they're healthy and happy, and that way it leads to higher profits. So I talk about three things in the workforce. I talk about the time, the talent, and the treasure. And if you are not aware, and if you are not stepping up to the plate to make environments as neuroinclusive as possible through your policies, practices, and procedures, then you're wasting time, you're wasting talent, and you're wasting treasure. And it's known, Gallup put out a report that nearly 9 trillion US dollars of GDP is lost annually because of disengagement. Other research shows that it takes 1.5 to 2 times salary to replace a person who leaves. And people leave all the time, not because of the organization, not because they don't like the work, but because of their manager, their supervisor, their direct leader. So if the managers, supervisors, and direct leaders don't have the understanding, the capability, the skill, etc., to not only understand, but to be empathetic, which is a emotional EQ, what we call EQ, emotional intelligence. Being empathetic is not Care Bears and rainbows. That's not what it's about. It's about understanding where people are and meeting them where they are so that they can have the best support they need in order to do their job the best, so that they can be the most productive that they can be, so that ultimately the organization has higher profit and, or if it's a nonprofit, has higher impact in the marketplace. So the human capital impact, and we look at my community, the autistic community, 75 to 85% of autistic people in the US are unemployed or underemployed, meaning they're in a position where they're not maximizing their outcomes. They're not getting paid the way that they should. They're not getting supported the way that they could be. So that's the human capital aspect. From a financial capital aspect, and what's the bottom line? You look at 30% higher margins. You look at double net income. You look at 90% increase in retention. So when people come to work and they're healthy and they're happy, they want to stay. And if they stay, then they're going to put all of their energy, at their time, talent, and treasure. They're going to put that into the work. They're going to put that into being promoted or not. Some people don't want to be promoted. They want to be an individual contributor, but give them the space and place to be that individual contributor in the way that their nonlinear thinking shows up, so that it can contribute to those who want to be promoted, to those who are on the other side of the organization. Because neurodiversity in the workplace is not just about the cubicle that an autistic or an ADHD or dyslexic person is sitting in. It's about the heartbeat of the entire organization. Because again, 30-40% of the US workforce is already neurodivergent, but 15 to 20% of the world's population, depending on who you ask, identifies, and that's the people who raise their hand and say, yes, I'm neurodivergent. We're not talking about the people that don't know. We're not talking about the people that do know and are hiding it because of all the bias and prejudice. That's just the people that we're aware of. So in my estimate, I would bump that to double, 40 to 50%, I believe, of the world's population. And that's not research, but I'm looking into it, uh, could be neurodivergent in some way, shape, or form. So all of that is what I bring to conversations with leaders so that they can understand that this isn't about charity. It's certainly not about compliance. It's about building community within your organization so that your organization can attract bigger and better clients. Your organization can maintain and sustain smarter and younger, not that older talent is thrown out the window, but I say younger because over half of Gen Z, which is the future workforce, identifies as neurodivergent. They are more focused on neuroinclusion than the four generations before them. The current workforce is made up of 4 to 5 different generations, but Gen X is the one that's identifying as neurodivergent the most. So if you want to look at the future workforce, you have to look at those people and say, what do those people need? They're raising their hands. They're invested in not only themselves, but their communities that think differently. These are the conversations that I have with leaders.
There's a lot there, actually. And in fact, a lot of what you said is relevant to the whole workforce, in fact, because people can be engaged,
Correct.
disengaged without necessarily being neurodivergent for sure. But the statistic that you bring up here and the point that resonated with me, that neurodiversity is now. We're not preparing for the future because it's now potentially 30 to 40% of your workforce now. So we need to do something about that. And it is that age-old question about how, not just how we engage employees and create happiness within our workplace, but how do we do that with people who we might identify as non-typical, but who are delivering value in different ways, in non-linear ways, and whether then you are actually enabling and getting the most out of your time, talent, and treasure rather than wasting it. I really like that, actually. That's very good. And I like the fact that you're referring to it as human capital. It's not human resource. This is on your balance sheet. So you make
100%.
the most out of your assets, as proved by the fact that 9 trillion, did you say, is lost through disengagement? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
Correct.
Yeah. So great. And the other point that resonated was, and in fact, this is from the Global Transformational Leadership Survey this year as well, came out the number one too. The number one trait that employees want from their leaders is empathy, more empathy, and they don't appear to be getting it. So here's the $64,000 question to you, Grant, is that you're an expert in this field. So how do you work with leaders to help them understand more about where neurodiversity can benefit the business, how they can build that community as they talked about it, and actually how they get started? Because I imagine they're thinking, where do I start?
Well, that's where my framework comes in. So excellent question. And I have a framework that I developed called RACE, RACE, 4-step cyclical process. And R stands for recognize, A stands for acknowledge, C is cultivate, and E is engage. So let's start with the R for recognize. So leaders have to recognize who and where you are on your journey. A lot of this is self-reflection. A lot of this is facilitated thinking. A lot of this is, okay, well, you perceive that there's an issue or a problem. I am not here to put a Band-Aid on it quickly and say, okay, well, we fixed that and I'm gone and I'm a commodity. That's not what it's about. This is about changing mindsets for the long term. And that starts with leaders understanding who and where they are in their journey. What are your core principles and values as a person, as a leader? Are you maintaining those? Are you upholding them? Do they need to change? Do they need to be? Do we need to add? Do we need to subtract from those core principles? What's the vision? And where are you on this journey? Are you just starting this journey, or have you tried something before and you had some type of failure, or you tried before and there was some type of challenge, or you've had successes and you're just trying to get to the next level? So the recognize is who and where you are from an individual leader perspective, but also from an organizational perspective. A, acknowledge. Acknowledge your intent versus your impact. I was actually talking about this in some comments on LinkedIn earlier this morning. As a leader, you have an intent and you have an impact. As a leader, your intent might be, well, I'm going to start this initiative because I think that it will be best for my employees. Well, the impact is, well, that initiative doesn't ring true to me as an employee. Like it either offends me or I don't see myself in it. Just because a leader in a silo decides to create a project or an initiative or makes a statement with well-intended, that does not mean that the impact upholds that intention. So you have to look at the impact of the most impacted employee in the organization. Who's going to be impacted the most and who's going to be impacted the worst, so to speak, from their time, talent, and treasure. And that's the person and or the people that you need to be building from to reach. That's the floor. And the ceiling is everybody else in between. Most leaders start with the person or the people or the department that's going to benefit the most. And they're going to benefit the most because they're going to make the most money or they're going to make the most innovative product. The opposite. It should be, you should start with the people or the department that's impacted the most and make sure that their needs are met. And if you can meet their needs, then you're certain to be able to meet the needs of everybody else up the ladder to the ceiling. That's the acknowledge. C is cultivate. Cultivate is gathering resources and education. Where are you getting educated? How are you educating your people? Asynchronous, live, synchronous. Are you bringing people in to speak? Are you going out into the community? What are you doing to cultivate new knowledge, new learning acquisition, new resources? What research are you looking at as a leader and as an organization to ensure that, not ensure, excuse me, I don't like to work in those kind of definitive terms, but to support your learning. I'm an educator at heart. I'm a psychology major and a philosophy minor. I'm all about thinking about my thinking, and I help other leaders think about their thinking, because a lot of times leaders don't do that. They just think about the problems or the issues and how they can solve them. They don't think about how to learn about avoiding that problem or issue in the future, and how to ultimately utilize the tools and the resources that they have right now to alleviate the pressure on that problem. So that's where the cultivate comes in. Last but not least, Jeremy, hang with me, is E, engage. Engage. I am a practitioner. I'm not a researcher. I respect all my researchers, but I can't do it. I can't just research and be like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to do more research. I have to research. I want to research, and then I want to do. I want to put it into action, see if it works, see if it fails, learn from it. That's the engage part. All of the thinking is great because I love to think about my thinking, but you also have to act on that. You have to put it into practice. You have to practice it. You have to practice inclusive language. You have to lead from the front and from the rear. The best leaders, Jeremy, are always leading at the front where people are looking at their back. The best leaders, in my opinion, are also behind people, pushing them from behind. So you have to practice these things, practice writing new policies, reviewing your policies, practice implementing new meeting techniques, practice being comfortable being uncomfortable. I tell my kids that all the time. In life, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. I'm certainly not comfortable talking as much as I do when I come on a podcast. It's not my natural state. It's not my natural way. But I have a message and I have a mission to share with people like you and your audience. So I get comfortable being uncomfortable for a bit. Leaders in organizations, large and small, need to do the same thing. They didn't get there by just being comfortable in their position. They got there by adjusting and changing, and they have to do the same thing for their workforce for the future. So that's the RACE framework that I walk organizations and leaders through. It doesn't take a day. It takes time. And that's why I want to work with leaders that are invested in the time, talent, and treasure it takes to really bolster their organization.
Yeah. And for me, the point that you made about some leaders who feel they know it all, this is a space where they can't know it all, and it's
Mm,
almost hidden from them as
mm,
well. And they should embrace that sort of Microsoft centered approach of learn it all, not know it all, as a leadership mindset for sure. And I like the race framework because for me, it's the journey from what, why, and where to the
mm,
how to in the engage
mm,
part. And it's very much about the leadership question changing from what to how to execute these days. And
mm, mm,
I'm assuming, Grant, that part of that execution also is not just about, right, what are we doing with these people and how do I engage? How do I demonstrate this? But how do we set the workplace up that way? So maybe if I
mm,
come to that point, because we read a lot more about that now, and
mm.
some leaders are struggling with it. So, from your experience, how should leaders who are invested and committed behind what you're asking them to do here set up the environment, the ways of working, the support infrastructure that recognize those needs of a more neurodiverse or less neurotypical workforce at all levels? And
Mm.
how can they get started with that?
They can start with their feet firmly planted in their CEO chair, and they can lead from the front by executive disclosure. I'll tell you, Jeremy, but by my research, 20 to 25% of the Fortune 500 CEOs identify as dyslexic. Either they identify with it or they say, yes, I am dyslexic, or they could see how they might be. But that's in private conversations. That's not like public knowledge. They aren't talking about that on a regular basis. But if they did, Jeremy, if CEOs and leaders of these organizations did lead with that, and they did lead with trust, and if they did lead with humility, and if they told their personal story, then everybody else in the organization can latch on to that. And they say, oh, I see the person or the people at the top doing it, talking about it, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, sharing their personal story, then everybody else, that's a trickle down effect. So it starts there, in my opinion. Not necessarily, oh, well, what other people outside the C-suite or the senior leadership team, this manager and that director, maybe they can start it and they can lead it. No, it starts with you as the tip of the spear to say, this is me, this is my experience. I'm humble enough to talk about it. I'm vulnerable enough to talk about it. And that goes back to empathy, what we were talking about before. That goes back to emotional intelligence, what we mentioned before. So it really starts there, and that's a trickle down effect. Outside of that, changing the language. The biggest, the simplest thing, and I always talk about what's one simple is not always easy. It is simple to use the right words or better words. It's not easy because we've been accustomed to bigoted language, to ableist language, to talking about autistic people as high or low functioning. We've been used to that as a society. But that is the first place that I go to say, let's start talking and using different words. Because if you're communicating differently, then that's how actions start to follow that. It's harder to start acting on something, but you're still talking about it the same way. If you talk about it differently, then you can act about it differently. So neuroinclusive language, I spent a lot of time talking about neuroinclusive language and the difference between ableist language and not. And if people are showing that level of emotional intelligence to change the way that they speak, then you can change the way that you act. Speaking in neuroinclusive language also comes from uh, uh, a different perspective in terms of asking questions. Many leaders don't ask enough questions. And if they do ask questions, which is a start, they're not asking the best questions in a way that lets other people open up to them because there's already a power dynamic, right? Authority, employee, power, no power. I'm going to ask you questions and you're going to answer them because I told you to. Instead of having a conversation, you, Jeremy, is asking me questions isn't a conversation. It's just an interrogation. But if we have a conversation about what I think or how I feel or about my experience, what's the best way that my brain that I see success? How do you see success? What's the best way for you to work? And then that's the manager to the employee or the leader to the employee. The reverse, employee to leader, would be something like, without having to disclose, because disclosure should not be necessary, but without having to disclose, you can cloak and disguise disclosure. Say, oh, this is the way my brain works. The way I operate is the best time of day where I feel the most energetic is I'm most productive at working this way. That's a way that employees can come out without being out about the way that their brain works and the way that they operate. So those two things I'll leave you with, Jeremy, because there's a lot that can go just with executive disclosure. That's a whole deal to get leaders to the point where they want to talk about it and be about it. And then from the entire organization perspective of inclusive communication, that's a whole big deal. Getting people to talk, speak differently, to use words differently, to be less ableist and more ability focused. These types of things, just those two, is plenty of work to be done within an organization. But those things lead to all of that financial and human capital impact that we were discussing earlier.
Yeah, that starting with the leaders themselves, that environment where it's safe to disclose as a senior executive, thinking about me first, my situation. I do have frailties. I do have things that don't quite work for me. And that creates that mental safety for everybody else. It starts to create the conversations, as you said, rather than just that top down. And the way that you described it that I particularly like also in those was that use of neuro-inclusive language, which then translated that talk into walking that talk and the doing the actions and the habits that are created through doing so at all levels in the organization. And that makes a lot of sense. But I imagine that some leaders that you're working with even now are finding that difficult. How do they get through sort of perceived roadblocks or their own kind of mental approach to this? No, it may be an unfair question, but what are they saying to you?
Oh, no unfair question. Well, I'm certainly not putting people on the therapist's couch. That's not my lane. But I do encourage, because again, while some of these concepts may be simple, they're not easy. It's certainly not easy work to come to a leader and say, hey, you might be able to do something better in a different way. I've been running this organization and I've been 30 years of experience and all of this. And I'm like, yeah, great. But that's not the end all be all. You could still get better. And I always mention this too, in my home and in my work, is getting 1% better. Like that's what the focus is. The focus isn't my organization is a B and I want it to be an A, or my organization is a C and I want it to be a B. That's not the focus. Or from a leadership perspective, I don't have all the tools or the skills to talk about neurodiversity because I've never heard about it before. Okay, we understand that. So you're not going to go from not having any of the skills one day to having all of the skills to be neuroinclusive the next day. No, but you can get 1% better from day to day. And if you get 1% better every day, and if you focus on one thing, one aspect every day, I'm not good at math, Jeremy, but at the end of the year, you're 365% better. So that's where I start from a base level of, I understand that this seems like a huge jump. I understand that this seems like a complete 180 from everything that you've been doing before, but you don't have to start there. You just have to start with 1%. Pick one thing that you want to focus on today. Pick one thing that you want to focus on in the next meeting. Pick one thing that you want to focus on this quarter. Pick one thing that you want to focus on this year and get 1% better at that thing. So that's a conversation I have when it comes to leaders being either fearful or hesitant. It didn't get this way. Organizations, leaders, people did not get this way overnight. I'm not expecting, and people that do this work aren't expecting for results to happen overnight. What should happen over time is that people get incrementally better. And when people get incrementally better, so does your business. So does society. So the 1% better is leaders take like a breath or a sigh of relief. They don't have to get it all done this quarter, this project or this initiative. If it's not showing everything that we think it should by 3 weeks, then it was a failure. No. When we get to that 3 week or when we get to that quarter, we look back and say, hey, look at all of this change that's happened that you didn't really know. Instead of setting that expectation that, oh, we're not inclusive now, and in 3 weeks, we're going to be inclusive. That's not how it works. So we're less inclusive than we can be now, and tomorrow, we're going to be 1% more inclusive than we were yesterday. That is how you flip that language and that mindset over time and through nuance. But I'm telling you, Jeremy, giving you, keys to the kingdom. But that's the 1% focus that I come with in my approach.
Yeah, and it resonates with me because many leaders, like me as well, I've been guilty of this. You look at a problem, whether it's digital transformation, whether it's workforce transformation, whether it's something to do with people, business, and you're looking at the whole and think, wow, that's big. How do I do this overnight? And the thing is, you don't. And it is those small right actions, that 1% a day, that create those early wins and build momentum. I think that's well reinforced that. And I'm going to fast forward just a little bit here, because the one thing that leaders are challenged with today is the speed of the overall change in the landscape of work and their businesses, whether that's digital, AI, the workforce, diversity of thinking, and the diversity of our organizations, and their own leadership, what they're having to learn, as much as what we've been talking about today, adding everything in. So as you look ahead, Grant, to the next 4 years and the 2030s that are looming, how do you see leaders in the workplace shifting much more in line for the kind of diverse workforce that you are helping them understand, and not just in terms of what it is, but how it delivers for the organization? And what are those things that leaders need to be aware of in that journey over the next few years?
Well, that goes to the future of work, right? And we talked earlier about the fact that over half of Gen Z, which is the future workforce, identifies as neurodivergent. They identify as LGBTQ. They are much more out loud and proud about social challenges and obstacles than future generations. So for me, the focus is there. Partially the focus is there. But the way that organizations, and you talk about speed, we have everything in the box of our phones. You got Amazon that will literally deliver in like an hour. You got DoorDash, and my daughter eats more food from DoorDash than she does from our refrigerator. So everything is about speed and how quickly we can get from point A to point B. My belief, Jeremy, is that the organizations, that the leaders that go slow to go fast, that slow down and that take a beat, are the ones that are more self-aware, the ones that are willing to understand that just faster is not always better. And if they slow down, and there are many different ways to slow down, but if they slow down and say, hey, okay, well, we have this transformation that we are looking at, but we want to have it done in this quarter. But if you break that down over time and using the 1% focus, and you slow down, then your result is going to be better. That's less rework. That's less mistakes. And if you slow down and look at the resources at hand, meaning neurodivergent employees, they routinely work up to 3 times faster than their neurotypical peers. And like I said, Jeremy, speed is not always better. However, especially in the autistic community, there's less than half the mistakes from the neurodivergent working population than there are in the neurotypical. So you get the best bang for your buck. You get a double whammy because in a neurodivergent working community, they tend to work faster, but they also tend to make less mistakes. So I'm not good at math again, Jeremy, but 2 + 2 is 4. And if I'm saying if there's a way that I can get the 4 faster and with less mistakes, not just faster, but also with less mistakes, then I want to take advantage of that. So that's where I'm saying that the future is. Number one, the future is obviously with Gen Z and the fact that they have a voice, and organizations should be leaning into that voice and listening to that voice with 2 ears and 1 mouth. Like I tell my kids, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should listen twice as much as you speak. I also tell that to leaders a little bit softer way, but I have the same concept. So listen to Gen Z. That's one. And number 2 is go slow to go fast. And the organizations and the leaders who I think slow down a bit versus just trying to keep up with the pace, they'll be able to see things clearer. And if they see things clearer, they can see that the neurodivergent workforce will help them get there faster and will help them get there more effectively and efficiently because of less mistakes, less rework, and better strategies and better systems in order to get to the ultimate outcome. That's what I see for the future.
Yeah, it's 3 to 4 times the speed, half the mistakes. This tapping into a neurodivergent workforce sounds like a superpower to me, and a super ability in our organizations that we're not tapping into because we're looking at it with a different lens. It's flipping that to embrace it and enable it in a way that really brings forth those benefits that you've been talking about throughout this conversation. I could continue this conversation all day, honestly. But sadly, we've come to the end of our time here, Grant, and I thank you very much for your openness and being so articulate with the specifics around this. I'm sure many of those tuning in will find this as a huge benefit. So for those that want to continue the conversation and find out more, how do they do that? Finding more about your business and connecting with you?
Yeah. LinkedIn is my hub. I'm regularly on LinkedIn, regularly post, love to communicate, love to have that interaction and connection. So LinkedIn, you can find me, Grant Harris 555 on LinkedIn. There are a few Grant Harrises out there, but only one me. So Grant Harris 555, and this will be in the show notes for you as well. And my website, compliance2community.com. compliance2community.com, and LinkedIn are the best ways to keep in touch with me. Happy to connect with your audience and your listeners. And I actually am going to shoot over a little bonus for you and your listeners, Jeremy, after the show. But I appreciate the time, and I look forward to staying connected with you and your audience on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to receiving the bonus. We'll make sure that our listeners get hold of that. Just remains for me to say thank you very much. And Grant Harris, it's been a pleasure.
Excellent, Jeremy. Thank you. I look forward to the next conversation.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. Please like, comment, and support us on your favorite platform, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch as well as listen to each episode.